Once upon a time, in a far, far away place, in the land of happily ever after, lived a fairy named Lucinda. She was beautiful, accomplished, intelligent, dignified, and amazingly wonderful fairy teacher who could instruct her classroom flawlessly. Lucinda's students were always engaged in activities. They never misbehaved, they stayed focused on task, and their transitions from one activity to the next were always smooth. She always had a plan for everything, and presenting new material to her students was a joy. When Lucinda would check for understanding, her students would always participate. Things seemed perfect in the land of happily ever after, but there was one teacher who wanted to be the best teacher in the land, and her name was Priscilla. The nomination for Best Teacher of the Year was going on, and both Lucinda and Priscilla had been chosen to be interviewed on how they could conduct instructions within their classroom. In order to win Best Teacher of the Year, they had to perform well on the interview. Priscilla decided she was going to gaze through a magic mirror and secretly watch Lucinda's interview.
Hello, and welcome to the Happily Ever After live edition coverage of the Best Teacher nomination interviews. We will begin our interview today with Lucinda, who teaches grades 9 through 12 health education. Welcome, Lucinda.
Thank you.
Lucinda, explain to us how you go about planning classroom activities.
Well, you see, it is extremely important that the students get the big picture. And what I want them to do is understand certain concepts, and I call these concepts objectives. In order for me to reach my objectives, I need to plan every detailed activity so that my students can learn the material.
What types of activities do you use in your classroom?
I use quite a bit of different activities, but I'll explain the basic ones I encourage teachers to use. Opening the period sets the stage for the whole entire class. This is where my students come into the class and are asked to either take out their homework from the previous day, or I engage them in an activity while I take attendance.
Do you have a way to check their homework?
Great question. My students usually correct their own homework, and they do this by using a different color writing utensil. And what they do is when a student gets something incorrect, all they do is mark a big X on the paper. And when they're done correcting, they will then turn in their papers to me so that I can record their grades.
Do you have an activity where the students can be involved by talking and communicating?
Yes, I have two different activities. I'll explain one right now, and it's called recitation. This is where I ask a question to the class, and I am looking for them to respond to see if they understand the material. These are quick responses and are usually used to check vocabulary or facts.
What is the other way students can be involved by talking and communicating?
The other way is a discussion. Sometimes these two are confused, but the difference between a discussion and recitation is that a discussion, the students respond to what other students are saying. In a recitation, it is more the teacher asks a question and the students answer, and then the teacher asks another question and the process repeats itself. In a discussion, it is important that students work on their listening skills, how they communicate ideas, and how they express different points of view, and how they resolve conflict.
Do you ever do any kind of demonstrations?
Yes, that is part of the content development activity where I either present new information, elaborate or extend on a concept or principle, conduct a demonstration, show how to perform a skill, or solve a problem.
Do students work individually on these tasks?
Yes, sometimes it's important for students to work alone. That is why one of the activities I have my students take part in is seat work. When we first start seat work, we begin it together. That way, if anyone has questions on the assignment, it can be answered. For some students, it is extremely important that they have individual work. They tend to learn better this way, but teachers need to be careful not to overuse this activity because it can become extremely boring.
Do your students ever take part in any group work?
They work in small groups, either on cooperative learning activities or on project-based learning activities. Small group work can be either extremely beneficial or it can be a complete failure. When the objects are clearly stated and the students know exactly what is expected of them, they are less likely to stray off task. However, if the objectives are unclear and the students don't know what is going on, then the group work becomes more of a social time.
When the class is coming to an end, do you have an activity that will help the students understand the end of the class is coming?
Yes, it's rather important to have a routine activity for the students to let them know that the end of class time is almost here. Every teacher is different, but I tend to set aside at least 5 minutes to go over what we did, summarize it, and then explain what is going to happen next class.
Now, I know that everyone is wondering how you deal with preventing misbehavior.
I use 2 different methods for preventing misbehavior. I call the first one with-itness, and the other one is overlapping.
What is this with-itness that you were talking about?
With-itness is when the teacher conducts misbehavior before it becomes out of hand and disrupts the whole entire classroom.
How is with-itness different from overlapping?
Overlapping is when a teacher handles 2 or more situations at the same time. So for instance, if there's a knock at my door while I'm in the middle of a lecture, how do I continue the flow of the lecture while answering the door? This is where overlapping would come into play.
What is it called when interruptions are caused by the teacher's lack of instructions or delays?
It is called managing movements, and there are 2 very important parts to this topic.
And what are they?
Momentum of the class and smoothness of the lesson. Momentum of the class refers to the pace of the class. Teachers can affect the pace of the class by getting stuck on repeating instructions or breaking down an activity in too many parts.
What is smoothness?
Smoothness is how well the lesson activity connects to one another and how effectively a teacher can keep the student engaged.
How do you keep your students alert and engaged in a lesson?
Sometimes all it takes is hands-on activity to get the students to pay attention. But other times, I have to warn my students that I am going to call on people randomly to answer questions, so they better be paying attention.
Hell yeah, they should. What is something that can really hurt student engagement?
Transitions can destroy student engagement because if the transition takes too long and is not related to the next activity, then this can ruin their interest. However, transitions are extremely important because they help in wrapping up one activity and leading to the next activity. The more structure and smooth the transition, the less off-task behavior that will occur.
We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. Continuing the idea of transitions, what can be done to make them run more smoothly?
It all comes back to instructional management and how well a teacher plans his or her lesson. When planning a lesson, it is important for the teacher to think about how they are going to help the students reach the objectives, which then leads into structuring appropriate activities to arrive at the desired outcomes.
Is it important for the students to know what the desired outcomes are?
Yes, presenting new content clearly is a great way for the students to understand what is expected of them. Showing students the agenda or organizing a handout with all the required vocabulary for the lesson is a great way to help students make connections as to why they are learning the material.
How do you know that your students are learning from your teaching style?
Because one of the most important things I do as a teacher is to stop and make sure that my students understand what I am trying to teach them. I check for understanding in a variety of informal ways, such as oral, written, or other performance skills.
Well, on that note, thank you, Lucinda, for the interview, and good luck on becoming the best teacher of the year.
Thank you.
Alarmed at how well Lucinda did in the interview, Priscilla decided that she was going to put a spell on Lucinda, sending her to a world where classrooms were far from perfect, Farmington, Maine. The only way Lucinda could return home was if she helped poor Miss Columbia come up with creative cooperative learning group tasks.
Go.